When three boys cornered Jalen Carter behind the gym that day, they thought it would be easy. They expected fear, a quiet kid, an easy target. What they didn't expect was the moment one of them hit the ground before he even knew what happened. And by the time the others realized, it was too late. They had just picked on the wrong kid. But before that day, before the fight, the whispers and the lies, Jalen was just another new face at Riverbend High, a school tucked away in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. He walked through the front doors one gray morning halfway through the semester. No one looked. Twice. No warm smiles, no curious glances. Just another transfer, student blending into the blur of backpacks and chatter. His hoodie was faded, his backpack frayed, and he moved with the kind of quiet that comes from learning how to survive unseen. He didn't walk slow or nervous, just careful, like someone who'd already learned what silence could protect you from. It was a Monday. Snow clung to the edges of the pavement, melting into muddy puddles. The bell rang sharp and loud, echoing through the halls. Jalen stopped at his locker, scanning the crowd with calm eyes. He wasn't scared. He'd seen worse, but he knew how schools worked. Find your classes, stay out of trouble, keep to yourself. Inside his first period math class, a few students looked up when he entered. A girl whispered something behind her hand. The teacher nodded toward an empty desk near the back. No introduction, no questions. Jalen didn't mind. He'd learned long ago that attention wasn't always your friend. Back home in Detroit, attention could get you jumped or worse. His uncle always said, move quiet, move invisible. It wasn't fear. It was survival. But Riverbend High wasn't like the neighborhoods he came from. Here, kids wore brand new sneakers and carried phones worth more than his rent. Their laughter was loud, confident, careless. They filled every hallway like they owned the place. Jalen didn't envy them. He just watched, quiet, studying the rhythm of a world that didn't quite have space for him. By his third day, he'd settled into a silent routine. Eat lunch alone, do your work, keep moving. That afternoon, he sat at the far end of the cafeteria, tray in front of him. Pasta, a banana, chocolate milk, simple, peaceful, until a voice cut through the noise. Yo, what's that? You bring that from home or something? Jalen looked up. A tall white boy in a varsity jacket stood a few tables away, smirking. That was Blake Turner, football captain, student favorite, and self-proclaimed king of Riverbend. Beside him stood two friends, both wearing the same smug grin. Jalen didn't answer. Blake laughed louder. Man's eating like it's the Great Depression. A few tables chuckled. Not everyone, but enough to sting. Jalen lowered his gaze and kept eating. He'd seen worse bullies. He knew better than to give them what they wanted. But silence has a way of making some people angry. One of Blake's friends leaned over. You hear me, dude? You deaf or just slow? Jalen met his eyes for a heartbeat. Then stood, grabbed his milk, and said quietly, I'm done. He walked out. No scene, no comeback, just gone. But the moment he left, something changed. Not for Jalen, but for Blake. Blake didn't see quiet. He saw defiance. And to a boy who built his reputation on control, that was unforgivable. That afternoon, someone knocked Jalen's books off his desk in science class. Nobody admitted it. The teacher didn't notice. After school, someone scrawled charity case across his locker in marker. He wiped it off, said nothing, and caught the late bus home. He stepped off near the edge of town, outside a rundown boxing gym tucked behind a tire shop. The smell of sweat and rubber hit him the moment he opened the door. Inside, his uncle Marcus looked up from wrapping a fighter's hands. You good? He asked. Jalen shrugged. Just school. Marcus didn't push. He nodded, toward the mats, then hit something that won't talk. Back. Jalen changed in silence and stepped. Up hooks, counters, footwork. Each strike clean, sharp, controlled. Marcus watched quietly. This wasn't a boy throwing punches. This was someone remembering who he was. And that night, under the dim light of the gym, the line between peace and pride began to blur. Because at Riverbend High, a quiet kid had just been noticed, and that was about to change everything. By Friday, the whispers had started. Blake Turner couldn't stop thinking about that look, the one Jalen gave him before walking away. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something worse. It was calm. And calm made Blake itch because calm meant control. By the end of the week, people were already talking. "That new kid's got an attitude," someone said in the locker room. "Doesn't talk to anybody, just stares." They said it like it was a threat. In gym class, Coach Reeves paired them up for basketball drills. Blake tossed the ball toward Jalen a little too hard, like a challenge. "Come on, Carter. Show me what you got." Jalen caught the ball, steady hands. "We just passing, right?" "Yeah," Blake said, fake grin in place. Jalen bounced the ball twice, then threw it back, hard and precise. The sound of it smacking Blake's chest echoed through the gym. A few heads turned. Someone muttered, "Dang," Blake smiled tightly. "Cool, you got an arm." But behind that grin, something cracked. From that moment, he decided he didn't like Jalen Carter. What started as small jabs turned into daily games of humiliation. Gum in the locker, a shove in the hallway, a paper note that said, "Watch your back." None of it broke him. He didn't flinch, didn't tattle, just kept moving. But silence in a place like Riverbend doesn't fade. It spreads. And Blake loved the attention it gave him. At lunch, he'd shout across the room, "Yo, Detroit, you forget your bulletproof vest again?" Laughter rolled like a wave. Some students winced, but nobody said anything. Jalen stared at his tray, ate slow, every bite heavier than the last. One of Blake's friends leaned over. "He's weird, man. Doesn't even blink." "He's not weird," Blake said, voice sharp. "He's just another sob story waiting to happen." That one landed hard. Jalen felt it. He could take insults, but not lies. Not from someone who didn't even know him. That night, his uncle noticed the change. The clenched jaw, the quiet that wasn't peace anymore. "You holding something in?" Marcus asked. Jalen nodded. "Trying to. Sometimes holding back's harder than swinging," Marcus said, eyes soft. "You don't owe anyone a lesson. You're there to graduate, not fight ghosts. But if someone backs you into a corner," he paused, "don't let them walk over you either." Jalen didn't answer, but the message stuck. At school, the rumors twisted into something darker. That he'd been expelled from his old school. That he'd once fought a teacher. That he carried a knife. None of it true, but truth never mattered when people already wanted a villain. By Thursday, the tension had turned electric. Even teachers could feel it. In history class, Blake leaned forward from behind Jalen. "You ever seen a real fight, Carter?" Jalen didn't turn. "Yeah, I mean up close. Blood bruises, that kind." Jalen finally looked over his shoulder. "You don't want that kind," Blake smirked. "That a threat?" Jalen's voice was even. "That's a warning." For the first time, Blake's grin faltered, but pride doesn't back down. The next day, Blake decided to make it official. After sixth period, Jalen was heading to the back parking lot, earbuds in, hands deep in his pockets. The wind carried the faint hum of buses leaving. Blake followed with two of his guys, keeping just enough distance to pretend it wasn't planned. "Yo, Carter." Jalen turned, one earbud slipping out. "What, you think you're tough?" "No, I think I'm trying to mind my business." "You don't get to choose that," Blake said, stepping closer. Jalen's shoulders tightened. "You done?" Blake's grin widened. "Not yet." Behind them, the hallway noise faded. Time slowed. The air between them felt too small for both to breathe. That night, the fight hadn't even happened yet, but something inside Jalen knew it was coming. And he hated that part of him, didn't fear it. Because some storms you don't run from, you brace for them, and this one was already on its way. The next day, the wind cut sharper. Most students hurried to their buses, but Jalen stayed behind to help Mr. Alvarez, the custodian, move old desks by the side exit. He didn't know Blake had planned it that way. An empty lot, no teachers, just shadows behind the gym. When Jalen rounded the corner, the three boys were waiting. Blake in the middle, hands in his jacket pockets, pretending to be calm. Jalen didn't change his pace. "If you're trying to scare me, pick a better spot." Blake smirked. "You think you're smart, huh? Too good to talk to me? I didn't come here for you." "No," Blake said. "You came here because no one else wanted you." Jalen's eyes narrowed. "You got something to say it." "I want to know what makes you so special," Blake said, circling closer. "You walk around here like you're better than everyone else. I'm just minding my business." "No, you're disrespecting mine." Jalen stopped moving. If you've got something to prove, do it. And that was all it took. Blake's friend Eli shoved Jalen's chest. Jalen didn't move. Go on, Eli, Blake said, smirking. Eli shoved again, harder this time, and Jalen's hand shot out. Smooth, practiced. One twist, one pivot, and Eli hit the ground so fast the air left his lungs before he could curse. The other boy, Ty, stepped forward. Fists half raised but froze. Blake stared. His smirk gone, Jalen met his eyes. Don't. But pride is louder than fear. Blake lunged, thinking his size would give him the edge. It didn't. Jalen slipped under the swing, hooked an arm, and dropped his elbow just below Blake's ribs. The sound of air leaving his chest echoed against the metal dumpster. Ty backed away. Yo, chill, man. 12 seconds. That's all it took. When it ended, Blake was on his knees, gasping. Eli sat stunned against the wall. Jalen just stood there, chest steady, not a mark on him. Then came the voice no one expected. What's going on here? Mr. Langston, the assistant principal, rounded the corner, eyes wide. Blake stumbled up, clutching his ribs. He jumped us! Jalen turned, calm. You serious right now? He's crazy. He attacked us. Mr. Langston looked between them. No blood, no visible injuries. Just silence, thick with tension and guilt. Office, now. They walked in silence, 3 steps behind one another. Jalen said nothing. He didn't need to, because in that moment, even with everyone's eyes on him, he knew exactly what kind of story they'd tell. And it wasn't his. By Monday, everyone at Riverbend High had seen the video. It wasn't long or clear. Just a shaky clip from behind the gym. Blake shouting, Jalen moving fast, then the camera jerking before it cut out. But it was enough. Enough for rumors to multiply, for whispers to echo in hallways, and for stares to follow Jalen everywhere he went. He wasn't the quiet new kid anymore. He was the story, and every storyteller had their own version. Some said he'd been waiting for a chance to fight. Some said he'd broken Blake's ribs on purpose. Some said he smiled when he did it. Jalen kept his head down, walking through a crowd that parted like he was radioactive. In the cafeteria, tables went silent when he passed. He sat in the back, same as always, but the air was different now, thicker, colder. Across the room, Blake sat with his crew, laughing too loudly. Dude's a psycho, Blake said. Came at us like a movie villain. I swear he's been in real fights before. Ty didn't meet his eyes. Eli stayed home. A bruise on his pride, not his body. A girl nearby frowned. But didn't you surround him first? Blake snapped. We were just talking. He flipped out. The girl didn't reply, but her face said enough. In gym class, Coach Reeves didn't pair Jalen with anyone. He just told him to shadow drills. No reason, no warning, no explanation. Jalen didn't argue. He was used to being singled out. It was nothing new. After school, he skipped the gym. Instead, he walked the long way home, through the side streets, past the convenience store where he sometimes bought a cheap snack, and down an alley lined with peeling posters and old graffiti. The cold wind bit his skin, but he liked the quiet. It was the only thing that didn't judge him. When he finally walked through the front door, his uncle looked up from the couch. A replay of an old boxing match played on the TV, the sounds of punches landing muffled through the speakers. Rough day? Marcus asked. People act different now, Jalen said, dropping his bag. You thought they'd cheer for you? Jalen shook his head. No, I just didn't think they'd look at me like I'm dangerous. Marcus muted the TV. Listen, when you defend yourself and win, you show strength. And strength scares people, especially the loud ones. Jalen's voice was low. I didn't even hit him hard. I held back. I know you did, Marcus said. But they don't care about that. You made him look weak, and some folks can't stand the mirror you hold up to them. Jalen looked down. So what do I do? You keep your head straight, Marcus said. You remember why you're there? You're not there to prove who you are to them. You're there to prove who you are to yourself. Jalen didn't answer, but the words dug deep. The next day at school, a guidance counselor called him in for a check-in. She smiled too tightly and asked too many careful questions. Do you ever feel angry, Jalen? He stared at her. Why? No reason, she said quickly. Just checking, he stood up. I'm fine. He walked out before she could say anything else. That night, his phone buzzed with a message. Someone had tagged him in a post. A blurry photo from the fight. The caption read, He thinks he's in a movie. Scared yet? The comments were worse. He's dangerous. Shouldn't be in school. Bet he's got a record. Jalen read every word. Not once, not twice, but enough times for the anger to turn into something heavier. Not rage, not sadness. Just wait. By Wednesday morning, 2 security officers stood by the main entrance. They'd never been there before. When Jalen walked in, one of them followed him with their eyes all the way down the hall. Then came the announcement. All students involved in last week's altercation are under review. A formal hearing will be held Thursday. Jalen sat still, didn't blink, didn't move. A hearing. So now it was official. At home, his uncle got the call too. He took the day off work for the meeting. Thursday morning, they walked into the district office together. The conference room was all gray walls and cold light. On one side sat the principal, a board member, and the head of student discipline. On the other, Jalen and Marcus. The principal cleared his throat. We've had several concerns raised by students and parents. Our job is to determine whether Jalen Carter poses a safety threat to the student body. Marcus leaned forward. My nephew isn't a threat. He's trained in self-defense. He didn't go looking for trouble. He tried to walk away. He warned them. The board member looked over his glasses. Is it true he has combat training? Marcus nodded. Yes, but training doesn't mean violence. It means control. It means knowing when not to fight. The assistant principal spoke up. There's a video circulating. It doesn't show the start of the fight, but it clearly shows Jalen as the aggressor. Of course it does, Marcus interrupted. Because it's edited. Silence filled the room. Jalen spoke for the first time. They came after me. I didn't swing first. I didn't want to be there. The board member tapped his folder. And yet you were involved in an act of physical aggression. Jalen leaned forward slightly. So what was I supposed to do? Let them hit me? The board member said nothing. Marcus exhaled. You're not just deciding about a fight. You're deciding what kind of student gets believed. You saw a big quiet black boy who defended himself and assumed he was the problem. Even the principal looked away for a moment. The room stayed silent. When it ended, they were told the decision was postponed. We'll review all the statements and deliver the results soon. Outside, Marcus clapped a hand on Jalen's shoulder. You did good. Doesn't feel like it. They heard you. That's more than most get. That night, Jalen sat outside on the back steps, cold air biting his skin. The stars overhead looked blurred through the city haze. He wondered if doing the right thing always came with this kind of punishment. If peace was ever meant for people like him, he didn't have an answer. But someone else did, and she'd been quiet long enough. It happened the next morning, in the cafeteria. Jalen sat at his usual spot, half listening to the hum of conversations he wasn't part of. A tray clattered down across from him. He looked up. It was a girl. Short auburn hair, round glasses, nervous eyes. He recognized her from art class. I saw what happened, she said, barely above a whisper. Jalen blinked. What? Behind the gym. I was sketching by the dumpsters. I saw everything. They cornered you. You told them to back off. He threw the first punch. He stared at her. Why are you telling me this now? Because if they expel you for something you didn't do and I stay silent, I'm no better than them. For the first time in days, Jalen felt something shift. Not hope exactly, but the edge of it. That night, when he told Marcus, his uncle smiled. Sometimes the right people stay quiet until silence costs too much. The next morning, she walked into the hearing room, nervous, hands trembling. But when she spoke, her voice didn't shake. They surrounded him, she said. 3 against 1. He didn't swing first. He told them to stop. I saw it all. The boardroom fell silent. Even the principal stopped writing. You didn't say anything until now? One of the board members asked. I was scared, she said softly. But that's not an excuse. When the hearing ended, Jalen and Marcus walked out into the cold parking lot. She didn't have to do that, Jalen said. No, Marcus replied. But she did, and that's what makes it matter. That night, the district sent the email. Jalen Carter is not subject to disciplinary action. Evidence confirms he acted in self-defense. Marcus printed it and pinned it to the fridge. But peace doesn't return overnight. And Jalen was about to learn that some battles don't end when you win. They just change shape. The news spread fast, but it didn't bring relief. When Jalen walked back into Riverbend High that Monday, the air felt heavier than before. No one said a word to him, yet every step he took made people move just slightly out of his way. It wasn't respect, it was distance. A quiet kind of fear. He was free from punishment, but not from judgment. In the halls, conversations died when he passed. During class, whispers followed. Even teachers hesitated, glancing up at him like they weren't sure what to expect. He wasn't the new kid anymore. He was the one who fought. He sat at his desk in English, eyes fixed on the board, pretending not to notice when someone switched seats to avoid sitting near him. At lunch, his usual table was still empty, but now the space around it looked like an invisible fence no one dared to cross. Across the cafeteria, Blake sat with his crew, loud as ever. His ribs had healed, but his pride hadn't. He retold the story like a hero who'd survived something dramatic. "Guy's crazy," he said. "Came at us like some street fighter. I didn't even hit him." Ty stared down at his tray. Eli said nothing. No one corrected him, but a few kids looked skeptical. Truth had started leaking through the cracks. Jalen kept quiet. He didn't need to defend himself anymore. The truth was out, even if not everyone wanted to see it. But quiet doesn't always mean peace. After school, he walked home slow, watching the sky turn a soft pink over the parking lot. He wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of being misread. Tired of silence being turned into guilt. At home, Marcus was on the couch again, flipping through an old boxing magazine. He looked up as Jalen came in. "Still quiet at school?" "Too quiet," Jalen said. Marcus nodded. "That's what happens after a storm. People wait to see if the thunder's coming back." Jalen half smiled. "And if it doesn't?" Then they learned to listen to the rain instead. That night, Jalen sat on his bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the girl. Her name was Lena Foster. The way she'd spoken up, the way her voice had shaken but didn't stop. He didn't know her, not really, but he owed her more than she'd ever know. The next few days were strange. Subtle changes rippled through the school. A teacher stepped in when a kid made a cruel joke in the hallway. 2 freshmen stood up for a shy boy who was being teased in gym class. They weren't big moments, but Jalen noticed every one of them. Maybe change didn't need to be loud. Maybe it just needed to start somewhere. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something unfinished was hanging over him. The story wasn't complete, not the real one. The one people whispered about still belonged to someone else. The semester moved toward winter break. The hallways buzzed with plans, snow trips, parties, family visits. But Jalen felt detached from it all, like watching a movie without sound. He walked slower than usual that day, letting everyone else rush past him. He didn't feel part of their rhythm anymore. When he reached his locker, a voice stopped him. "Hey, Jalen, hold up a second." He turned. It was Miss Curtis, his English teacher. Her expression was kind but serious. "We're having a student-led assembly tomorrow." One of the speakers dropped out. "A few of us thought you might want to say something." Jalen froze. "Me?" She smiled gently. "Only if you want to. I just think people need to hear from you. Not the version that's been floating around, but you." He didn't answer. He just nodded once, unsure if he meant it. That night, he sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor with a notebook in front of him. The page stayed blank for nearly an hour. His mind was full, but the words were tangled. Finally, he wrote one sentence. "I didn't ask to be here, but I'm not going anywhere either." He stared at it. The line felt small but true. The next morning, the auditorium was full. Hundreds of students filled the seats, restless, chatting, unaware of what was about to happen. Teachers stood along the back wall, their faces unreadable. Jalen waited behind the curtain, heart pounding steady but strong. When they called his name, the noise faded a little. He stepped onto the stage and walked to the microphone. No paper, no notes, just his voice. "I've been called a lot of things since I got here," he began, his tone calm, even. "Quiet, weird, dangerous." A few nervous laughs echoed, but he continued. "Some of you probably still don't know what to make of me. That's fine. I didn't come here to impress anybody. I came here to finish high school, to get through my day without drama." The crowd went still. "I'm not going to stand up here and pretend I'm perfect. I've been angry. I've made mistakes. I've been hurt. But if the only story you know about me is the one somebody else told, then you never knew me at all." He paused. The room was silent now, listening. "I'm from a place where keeping your head down is how you survive, where you learn early when to speak and when to stay quiet. But being here taught me something new, that silence can make lies louder, And I won't let someone else tell my story anymore. He looked up, scanning the crowd. Don't be so quick to label people. You don't know what they've been through or what they're carrying. Next time you want to laugh at someone or spread a rumor or post something you don't understand, maybe try asking first. He stepped back from the microphone. For a moment, there was no sound. Then one person clapped, then another. Then the applause grew, not wild, but honest. Jalen didn't smile. Not right away, but inside, something loosened. As he left the stage, he passed Lena in the crowd. She didn't wave. She just met his eyes, and that was enough. Later that afternoon, as students poured out of the building, a younger kid stopped him near the gate. You really trained to fight? The kid asked, eyes wide. Jalen shrugged. I trained to stay ready. Can you teach me? Jalen studied him. You sure you want to learn? It's not about hurting people. The boy nodded. I just don't want to be scared anymore. Jalen smiled, faint but real. All right then. First lesson, stand tall, even when it feels easier to shrink. They walked side by side toward the street, the winter light soft against their faces. Because sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with fists. They're fought just by standing up and saying, I belong here too. And for the first time since he stepped through those school doors, Jalen Carter finally believed it. That night the air outside was still. Snow had started to fall in slow, heavy flakes, coating the streetlights in a quiet glow. Jalen walked home alone, his breath fogging in the air, his thoughts tangled but clear. He wasn't thinking about the fight anymore, or the stairs, or the names they called him. He was thinking about how for the first time his voice had actually been heard, not twisted, not mocked, heard. When he reached home, Marcus was sitting on the porch steps, coat zipped up, coffee in hand. Heard you made some noise today, he said, a slow grin pulling at his face. Jalen sat beside him, the wood cold under his jeans. Didn't mean to. Just said what I needed to say. That's what real noise sounds like, Marcus said quietly. The kind that don't come from shouting. Comes from truth. They sat in silence for a while, watching the snow gather on the empty street. For the first time in months, the quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. The next day, school felt different. Subtle but real. People didn't look away anymore. Some nodded. Some smiled awkwardly, unsure of what to say. Others just watched with something close to respect. The story had changed. Not completely, but enough. Even Blake had changed. He hadn't said a word to Jalen since the assembly. Not in class, not in the halls. But that afternoon when Jalen opened his locker, a folded note slipped out. Just one line written in messy, hurried handwriting. You didn't deserve that. No signature. But Jalen didn't need one. He folded it once, tucked it into his pocket, and left it there. Some apologies don't need words spoken out loud. Weeks passed. The snow deepened, the semester ended, and the halls began to buzz again. This time not with rumors, but with life. Students who had once whispered behind his back now stopped him to ask about homework, or to nod at him in passing. Little things. Real things. One afternoon he caught Lena by the art room sketching near the windows again. Hey, he said, stepping closer. She looked up and smiled faintly. Hey, thanks again, he said. You don't have to thank me, she replied softly. You just had to be seen, he nodded. Guess it takes one quiet person to notice another. She laughed. That small kind of laugh that fades fast but lingers anyway. As winter faded into early spring, Jalen began spending more evenings at the gym again. Not because he was angry, but because it grounded him. The rhythm of the pads, the sound of breath and focus, it all reminded him of what Marcus had said long ago. Training wasn't about violence. It was about control, about peace. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the buildings, the door creaked open and a few younger kids peeked in. The same ones who'd asked about learning to fight. Marcus raised an eyebrow, then looked at Jalen. Your students? Jalen smiled. Guess so. Marcus nodded toward the mats. Then teach them what I taught you. Jalen turned to the boys, motioning them closer. All right, he said. First rule, this isn't about hurting people. It's about not needing to. They listened, eyes wide. Jalen could see pieces of himself in them, quiet, uncertain, trying to find where they fit. He taught them how to stand firm, how to keep balance, how to move with purpose. But more than that, he taught them how to breathe through fear. Outside, the snow had melted, leaving puddles that reflected the dim lights of the gym. The world felt a little lighter. Weeks later, Riverbend High announced an essay competition for the end of the year. The theme was "What Makes You Strong?" Jalen didn't plan to join at first, but Ms. Curtis found him after class. "You should write," she said simply. "You've got something to say." So he did. He wrote about strength, not the kind that breaks bones or wins fights, but the kind that holds steady when everything around you wants to crush you. The strength to walk back into a room where you've already been judged and still stand tall. When he handed it in, he didn't expect much. But a week later, his name was announced over the loudspeaker. First place. The next morning, his essay was printed in the school newsletter. And for the first time, people weren't whispering about what he'd done. They were talking about what he'd said. That night, Jalen walked through the empty halls long after everyone had gone home. The lights hummed softly, casting long shadows across the lockers. He stopped by his old one, the same locker that once said charity case in marker. He touched the door, then smiled to himself. It was clean now. He didn't wipe the words away this time. Life did. When he stepped outside, the air smelled like rain. The sky was dim and wide, the kind that promised something new. He pulled up his hood, hands in his pockets, and started walking home. For the first time since he arrived at Riverbend High, the road didn't feel long. It felt open, because surviving had turned into something more than endurance. It had become belonging. And as Jalen Carter walked beneath the streetlights, the snow melting under his shoes, he knew the truth that took him months to learn. Some fights aren't about fists or fear. They're about standing where the world told you not to. And when you do, when you stay standing, everything changes. Even the silence learns your name.